Good evening. My name is Don Villafana. I'm your Public Works Director. And tonight we've got a informational water rate workshop. But the first part of this is just an introduction to our water system, or your water system. And the Water Division is part of Public Works. And our water system, the City of Port Hueneme domestic water system consists of over 249,000 feet of pipe. That's over 47 miles. And the pipe ranges in size from 2 inches to 14 inches. There are two 12-inch potable water supply connections and a 24-inch diameter Port Hueneme Water Agency transmission line. And there are approximately 5,684 potable water service connections. We have just slightly over 393 fire hydrants, over 3,000 valves. We have 2 standby wells and 1 inactive well, and we have 4 emergency connections to adjacent agencies, and 1 closed pressure zone. Basically, the 1 closed pressure zone means the City of Port Hueneme is flat. Hilly jurisdictions have multiple pressure zones to deal with the difference in elevation. For example, the City of Ventura has a number of pressure zones because of the difference in elevation from one part of the city to the next. Our transmission and distribution system, again, the system is over 249,000 feet, and the distribution system pipes range in size from 2 inches to 14 inches in diameter. Approximately 2% of these lines are 4 inches or less, 52% are 6 inches, 26% are 8 inches, and 9% are 10 inches in diameter. Where do we get our water? We get our water through the City of Port Hueneme is supplied through the Port Hueneme Water Agency, which includes the City of Port Hueneme, the Channel Islands Beach District, and our Navy bases. The Port Hueneme Water Agency purchased approximately 80% of our water from the United Water Conservation District, with the remaining 20% from the Calleguas Water District. And that's a picture of our water treatment plant out on Perkins Road. And you can pick up a copy of this PowerPoint presentation at the back table there, and it is posted on our website also. All right, how old is our city water system? Approximately 30% was installed in the 1940s and 50s. Approximately 30% was installed in the 1960s. 22% was installed in the 1970s. A 14-inch water main that serves the northern portion of the city was installed in the 1940s. And this is a map showing the age of the various portions of our water system by those different colors. And again, you can see this in more detail if you pick up a printout of the PowerPoint or if you go onto our website. Maintaining our water system. As our water system ages, there are more leaks. This past year, we've had over 20 leaks. Here's some photographs of our water division and our street crew combining to repair the number of water lines that had leaks. We had a sinkhole on Pleasant Valley Road. We had to minimize disruption to traffic, we did the repairs at night, and you can see that. Aging infrastructure, water valves from Clara Street. That water valve was installed in the 1960s, and as I mentioned, our system has over 3,000 valves. Public Works continues to make repairs, including replacing the valves. And the bottom picture is of the new valve that went in there. That valve was leaking. So, planning for the future, Water Master Plan. The city had a consultant prepare a Water Master Plan in 2011, outlining what needs to be done to maintain and prepare for the future. And we are in the first phases of implementing this plan. And that's the end of my portion of the presentation. And at this time, I'm going to turn over the presentation to Steve with Raftellus, our consultant. Thank you, Steve.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Steve with Raftellus. And We were hired by the city of Port Hueneme to help assist them with a water rate study. We've been working on it for about a year and a half, and a water rate study is when you study if revenues are high enough to cover the city's water system costs. So tonight we're going to present to you the results of that water rate study. And here are what I hope you will learn as a result of this presentation. What is covered by the water rates that you pay. We'll take a look at current water rates, why water rate changes are needed, how the city developed the proposed rates. Then we'll take a look at the proposed water rates. We'll talk about what the city did to keep water rates low. Then we'll talk about how customers' bills will change, and then we'll talk about next steps. So during a water rate study, there's a lot of terms thrown around, and it's not our intent to confuse people, but you'll hear at least these terms tonight, and you can flip to this part of the presentation to understand what each term means, and of course you can always ask a question if you'd like. So what is funded by the water rates that you pay? There are approximately more than 5,100 single-family residential customers, homes in the city, approximately just shy of 300 multifamily customers, that's not apartments, but just customers, about 200 commercial customers, and 237 irrigation customers. And the water utility is not a general fund activity. In other words, it's not supported by tax dollars. It's a standalone entity, and it functions through water rates. So it covers its costs through the bills that customers pay. It doesn't receive tax money. So it's a standalone entity. And I think I said all of the points there. The water rates that you pay on your utility bill fund all the operating costs, and infrastructure investments that Dawn was talking about earlier are paid through water rates. This is the current rate structure, and just out of curiosity, do you guys own a business, or do you have a home, or a home? Okay, so then you'll fall under single family residential here. So right now, single-family residential customers pay a fixed charge of just about $38. This doesn't vary with water use. You pay $38 no matter how much water you use. Then you pay $3.80 per HCF, that's 100 cubic feet. One HCF is 748 gallons. So for every HCF you use, you pay $3.80. That is the current single-family rate structure. This is the rate structure for businesses on this side. They pay a charge based on meter size and then a different volumetric rate. But that's all I'll say there, since there aren't any business customers in the audience. And so let's talk a little bit about why rate changes are needed. So the city provides water service, and the city's costs are going up. The city buys water from the Port Hueneme Water Agency, and that agency's rate to the city for water it sells to the city is going up, and it's expected to go up about 4% a year. Now we're predicting the future here, so it won't be exactly 4%, but we're estimating it'll be about 4% a year. Probably the biggest driver for increase in water rates have to do with infrastructure. Dawn just showed a presentation about old valves and old pipes. A lot of your pipes are from the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Pipes corrode in the ground, and they last anywhere from, it depends on the material, when it was made, depends on the corrosivity of the soil, anywhere from, let's say, 70 to maybe 120 years if you're lucky. At some point, pipes and valves need to be replaced. The city wanted to enhance affordability, encourage conservation by changing the way it prices water service, and we'll talk about that in a second. The city is changing its rate structure, and something to keep in mind is that water rates haven't changed since 2012, so the city's water costs have continued to go up every year, yet the city hasn't changed rates since 2012, so that's one reason why rate changes are needed. How did the city develop the proposed rates? So we we created what's known as a financial plan or a financial model where we project revenues and expenses for the next 5 or 10 years. And we do an analysis and try to assess, are revenues enough to cover costs? And if they're not, we adjust water rates to cover costs. So we did that, and we found that the revenue, overall revenue, should go up about, let's just call it 2% a year to cover costs. And this is below the national average. So the American Water Works Association did a study across the country and found that on average water rates are going up 6% a year across the country. And the popular thinking is that one of the biggest drivers for that 6% increase across the country is due to infrastructure. So as a country, you know, we all started building, cities started building water and wastewater treatment plants around the 40s and 50s. And as a country, on average, our water and wastewater systems are anywhere from 50 to 100 years old, and that's when things start to need to be replaced. So as a country, we have to start replacing our infrastructure, water and wastewater infrastructure, and that's the reason for the 6%. But here at Port Hueneme, City Council has decided to implement 2% revenue adjustments each year, which is well below that 6% average. After we figure out how much money the city needs, we do something known as a cost of service study. I won't get too much into this, but as a rate setting practitioner, you follow some guidance put forth by the American Water Works Association in their M1 manual that provides guidance on how to allocate costs, right? If you see this as your total costs, the cost of service study then take those costs and decides how much each user class owes. So at the end of a cost of service study, you know single family owes X $1,000, multifamily owes Y $1,000, and so on. You have a clean calculation that shows how much each user class needs to pay. So let's talk about the proposed water rates. This is just a reminder, we saw this before, this is a reminder of the current rates. And right now, a typical single-family home, if they use the average, which is around 6 HCF, pays about $60 monthly. The city bills bi-monthly, by the way, but when we do comparisons, I'd say more agencies charge monthly. So when we want to compare to other agencies, we do it on a monthly basis. So $60 here at Port Hueneme. And by the way, there is a city care program that if you meet certain guidelines, low-income guidelines, that rate is actually a 7.5% discount to normal customers, and they would pay, let's call it $55 each month. So as part of this study, we're proposing rate structure changes, and that's because when we started the study, we met with City Council, and we tried to assess what was important to them. And there's a number of different objectives that you can achieve when you set rates. And we did this exercise with City Council, and what we got from them was that they value affordability and conservation. So we decided to propose a rate structure that aligns with those objectives. So the rate structure that we're going to talk about here promotes affordability and it promotes conservation. And the way we've done that is that the city currently collects about 60% of its water revenue through a fixed charge, that $37 that we looked at earlier. That doesn't change based on how much water you use. So this means that customers' bills vary less with water use, since a major portion of their bill is fixed, right? That $38 is fixed, doesn't matter if you use 2, 4, 6, or 8. If the city, what we're proposing is that the city's rate structure will now have a 30-70% split between fixed and volumetric revenue generation. So in other words, what I'm saying is the city is proposing to decrease the fixed charge. But they still want to collect the same amount of revenue. So if you decrease the fixed charge, you have to increase the volumetric rate to collect the same amount of revenue. So what this means in the end is that those who use less water will have a lower water bill compared to what they're paying now. And those who use more water will have a higher water bill. That's the end takeaway. So again, it promotes affordability for low water users, and it sends a conservation signal, because now your rate structure goes, or your bill will be higher the more you use. So these are the proposed monthly fixed charges, and this is for single-family residential. So that, as I just said, the takeaway probably from this slide is that here's your current fixed charge, and I'm just going to concentrate on single-family residential. Most, if not all, or almost all, of your single-family residential customers have these, either a 5/8 inch meter or a 3/4 inch meter. And remember, it was about $38, that fixed charge. We are now proposing that that will go down to, I like to round, so $25, from 38 to 25. And then it would go up 2%, 1.9% every year. And then that's only the fixed charge. Then customers would also pay the volumetric rate. And we're proposing a 3-tiered rate for single family and single family care. And that's based on this tier structure. Tier 1 would be 0 to 4 HCF monthly. Tier 2 would be 4 to 7 HCF monthly. And Tier 3 would be anything greater than 7 HCF monthly. And the way we came up with that is we looked at water use. And we looked at winter water use. So in the winter, one could argue that there's not much watering going on your lawn, right? So most, if not all, of the water use is inside the home for necessary water use, I'll call it. And we found that the average winter use was 4 HCF. So that's how we set the first tier, is we're essentially saying that most single-family customers in Port Hueneme, their indoor water use is up to 4 HCF. Now, there's going to be exceptions, of course, but for most, the average, it's 4 HCF. Then 7 HCF is a typical summertime water use. So when summer rolls around, I don't think there's terribly large lots in Port Hueneme, but some people do obviously irrigate a little bit. They use a little more in the summer, up to, on average, 7 HCF for outdoor water use. So that's how we set the second tier. First one is indoor water use. Second one is essentially outdoor water use, and anything beyond that you could say is at least above the average for outdoor water use. These are the rates that we're proposing for single family, for all classes. So single family, regular single family here, right now, remember we saw they pay a uniform rate per HCF of $3.80. So now we would have 3 tiers. It would go from $571 tier 1, $581 tier 2, $665 tier 3. And then every year after that, it would go up 1.9%. Okay? And then this over here is simply single family care. That's simply a 7.5% discount if you show that you qualify for, I think it's PG&E, the gas provider, or San Diego Gas and Electric, Southern California Gas and Electric. Then if you show that you qualify for their program, you qualify for care. And then we have other classes here: multifamily, commercial, city property, irrigation, and city irrigation. And they have uniform rates, which means they're not tiered. That's all that means. But you can see, let's look at irrigation, for example. You can see that 702 is more than single family, and commercial and city property, 671, is still a little more than tier 3. The way we set rates there is we base them on peaking factors, which essentially means your variation in water use. So just like in electricity, people understand that if you're using an air conditioner on a hot August day, they're paying more for their electricity at 4 o'clock in the afternoon when they're running their air conditioner than they are if they're running something at 2 o'clock in the morning, because the electric company has to go out and either turn on another turbine or buy the electricity off the grid. So there are peaking costs for an electrical utility. Well, there are peaking costs for water utilities as well. It's not so much that a utility has to go maybe to another plant, but the system was sized in a certain way to meet peaking needs. If everyone used average water use, the system could be smaller. Pipes could be smaller, tanks could be smaller, pumps could be smaller. So what we're saying here with rates that reflect peaking is that we're allocating those costs in proportion to how each customer class peaks on the system. That was probably a long explanation, but if you peak more, your rate is higher. That's what I'm getting at. So what did the city consider to keep rates low? From the start of this study, affordability was a very high concern for the city. In fact, when we started, I remember this was over a year and a half ago, we had 5 special questions that we had to answer that were questions that had to do with assessing how we could keep rates low. So we answered those 5 questions, and I won't go through all of them, but I think most of them are up here. Here are some things that the city is doing to keep water rates low. First, they're using reserves. So the water utility has cash reserves, savings, just like you have a bank account. And the city has some reserves, and in essence, the rates we're setting right here don't actually fully meet all costs. There's a little bit of a deficit, just a little bit of a deficit. But that wasn't intentional because the city has some reserves, and so it's essentially buying down rates a little bit every year to use those reserves. So that's one way the city is keeping rates low. The second is, as Don mentioned, the city has a water master plan. A water master plan is a study that an engineering firm does and says, this is the condition of your water system, these are the things that you need to repair and replace, this is what you need to look at, this is faulty, and so on. And they identified a number of projects that need to be done in that study. And one of the things in there mentioned fire flow, and so there were some fire flow and fire pressure deficiencies that needed to be addressed. And the study basically identifies a number of projects, and it assumed that those projects would be executed over 8 years. And what the city said is, let's do them, let's spread them out over time a little bit so that we do them over 12 years. Because the more you do in a shorter amount of time means you need more money. So that means your rates would be higher. If you did it all in 8 years, the city said we'll do it all in 12 years. So that spreads those capital costs over 12 years and lowers the rates a little bit. At one point in time, the water utility could not have been in great shape because there was a loan made from the general fund to the water utility. And the water utility continues to pay back to the general fund that loan. And it was decided, it was made back in 2008, give or take, and interest rates back then were much higher. So the city wanted to evaluate whether or not they could refinance that loan, so to speak, just like you refinance a mortgage. And they decided to refinance that loan at a lower interest rate, and so that lowers the payments from the water utility to from the water utility to the general fund. And lastly, the change in the rate structure is one way that is going to create lower bills for customers. By virtue of lowering that fixed charge, it's going to create lower bills for lower water users. And we'll take a look at that in a second. This is just a reminder that there is, I guess, another way the city is promoting affordability is that it does have a city care program that discounts the volumetric rate and the fixed charge by 7.5%. So let's finally take a look at probably the most important part of the presentation, which is how is it going to affect customer bills. So because we're reducing the fixed charge, we did an analysis of bills, and this does rest on the assumption that people continue to use water as though they did in 2018, because we did start this study a while ago, and we had 2018 data. So this assumes that people use water like they did in 2018, and if that holds true, then we think approximately 70% of customers should either see no change in a bill or a decrease in their bill. 20% of customers will see an increase that is lower than $20, and 10% of customers will see a bill increase that's greater than $20. This is just that same conclusion in numbers. I'll just point out that the average use here in Port Hueneme is around 6 HCF. bills are gonna go from $60 and change to $59 and change, so a small decrease in your bill for the average customer. And if you use less, then you get more of a discount. And if you use more, right, this is monthly use, right? So the more you use, you can see their bills are going up. So let's just look at maybe a customer who uses 14 HCF. Their bill is gonna go up $20 a month. And by the way, this is the last 5% of your customers. That's what this number is saying here, is that 95% of your customers use 14 HCF or less. So that means 5% of your customers use more than 14 HCF. So 5% of your customers will get a bill increase of at least $21. Simply saying the same thing, 70% of customers will see either no or a negative bill decrease. 10% of your customers will see $0 to $5, and so on down the line. That's probably about 5% of your customers will see greater than a $20 increase. This is the same data for single-family care, basically the same thing. Here we're assuming, again, the average of 6, a 3/4 inch meter, and a bill going down about $1.78, which is in line with single-family regular customers. So next steps are that the city will mail a Prop 218 notice to every parcel owner and customer by mid-December. There will be a second information session on December 18th at 6 p.m. It'll essentially be the same presentation as tonight. Then there will be, we have to wait 45 days for the notices to be sent out, and there will be a public hearing on February 3rd during a regular city council meeting. If approved, the rate changes will be effective in early March, and customers will see changes beginning on their March or April bill. I concentrated on single-family customers. However, it depends on water use. We saw that a lot of single-family customers' rates will be going down, but a lot of commercial customer bills, especially if they use a lot of water, will be going up. But since tonight there's no one here from commercial, I did not concentrate on that. And that's my formal presentation, and we can answer questions, take comments. From anyone.